Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Lila Harper had never seen the world. Since her birth, darkness had been her only companion. But her other senses compensated for this deprivation. She felt people's emotions, heard the faintest vibrations of life around her, and perceived the world with an intensity that most people did not know. Her mother, Margaret Harper, had lived in poverty for years. Hunger, misery, and debt had hardened her and made her selfish. She saw Lila not as her daughter, but as an object, a ticket to escape her misfortunes. One freezing night, Margaret struck a deal with Victor Sinclair, a wealthy and influential man known for his whims and absolute power. Lila was led to Victor's mansion, an imposing place filled with glittering chandeliers, thick carpets, and sumptuous furniture. The contrast between her world of poverty and this opulent universe was overwhelming. Every step she took echoed through the silent corridors, and every sound stirred a deep, dull fear within her. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but a chilling intuition whispered that her life was about to change forever. Victor, seated in his large study, observed the young girl. There was a strange innocence in her gestures and posture that unsettled him. It wasn't just her blindness that fascinated him, but the purity of her soul, something that neither money nor power could buy. But that night, in the heavy silence of the manor, Lila was exposed to a cruel world she knew nothing about. Her fragile, luminous innocence was about to be tested in unimaginable ways. The wind howled through the manor's windows, as if to warn Lila, as if to shout the imminent danger. She was alone, vulnerable, and dependent on others for every step. This night would mark the beginning of a dark path, where betrayal, pain, and resilience would intertwine to forge her destiny. And so, in the darkness that had always been her refuge, Lila Harper was confronted for the first time with a world where light and shadow mingled cruelly, and where her innocence would be the first victim. Lila Harper woke up in a room she didn't recognize. The bed was large, the sheets soft and cold against her skin, and the air smelled of the subtle scent of wood and leather. Morning light filtered through heavy curtains, but for her, the world remained a silent mystery. Every sound was amplified, the ticking of a distant clock, the creaking of floorboards underfoot, the steady breathing of a life she didn't know existed but which watched over her. A maid entered, shy but polite, carrying a breakfast tray. "Miss Harper." "Mr. Sinclair." Her voice trembled slightly. Lila instinctively reached out, seeking a familiar presence. The maid, seeing her hesitant movements, understood that she must guide the young girl. But before she could speak, a door burst open. Victor Sinclair entered the room. His penetrating, icy blue gaze scrutinized Lila like a painter observing a blank canvas. "Well, my dear, you're awake." His voice was deep and controlled, yet exuded an authority that made the young girl tremble. Lila felt her heart beat faster. She didn't know what was expected of her, or why she was there. Every word Victor spoke sounded like a riddle. He spoke softly, but there was an implicit promise of control and power in his tone. "You're going to stay here, for your own good." His statement was ambiguous, almost like a veiled threat. Lila didn't fully understand, but her instinct screamed that her life had changed forever. The following hours were a mixture of confusion and fear. She was shown the corridors of the mansion, the immense dining room, and even the library filled with books she could never read. Everything was grand, overwhelming, almost unreal. But behind this opulence lay an implacable coldness, a world over which she had no control. Victor often returned to observe her, asking seemingly innocent questions, testing her reactions, noting every nuance of fear or innocence in her voice. Lila, naive and vulnerable, answered as best she could, all the while trying to understand this man and the world he represented. Night fell again, but for Lila, sleep eluded her. The walls of the manor seemed to close in, and every shadow took on a menacing form. She had been torn from her world, thrown into a universe where her fragile innocence would be tested, where every decision and every gesture would be scrutinized. And in the oppressive silence of that first full night at Victor Sinclair's, Lila understood a terrible truth: she was no longer free. Her destiny had been sold, and that destiny would be shaped by forces she could neither see nor control. The days passed in oppressive slowness. Lila Harper was getting used to the icy grandeur of the mansion, but never to the constant and oppressive presence of Victor Sinclair. Every morning, she woke with the latent fear of what the day would hold, and every night, she fell asleep exhausted, her heart heavy with anxiety. Victor, for his part, seemed fascinated by Lila's fragility. He arranged times when he observed her under the pretext of educating her. He told her about books she couldn't read, trips she couldn't take alone, and worlds she could never see. But in his words, there was always this underlying tension, a mixture of control, fascination, and testing her limits. One evening, as the rain beat against the windows, Victor summoned Lila to his study. The room was immense, filled with portraits of stern ancestors and dark wooden furniture. The glow of the candlesticks cast shifting shadows on the walls, accentuating the heavy atmosphere. "Lila," he said softly, but each syllable seemed to carry the weight of a command. "You're here for a reason. It's time you understood what I want from you." Lila felt a dull panic rising within her. She trembled, but her curiosity compelled her to stay. "What do you want, from me?" she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. Victor approached slowly, his intense blue eyes following her every move. "You're special, different. There's something about you that no one else has. And I want to see how far it can go." The words were enigmatic, but their implications chilled Lila. She was beginning to understand that her life here was not only confined by the walls of the manor, but by the will of this man who could dictate her every move. In the days that followed, Victor imposed strict rules. Lila couldn't move around alone in certain parts of the mansion, always had to answer his questions, and obey his instructions. But beneath this discipline, he sometimes allowed her small gestures of kindness, almost indistinguishable from manipulation. Every smile, every act of kindness, became a subtle trap. Lila, blind but perceptive, began to develop a silent strategy, listening, memorizing, sensing Victor's emotions, and anticipating his movements. She knew her survival depended on her ability to understand this man and navigate this cruel world without ever showing her fear. And in the silence of lonely nights, as the manor seemed to breathe around her, Lila Harper understood one thing: she was no longer just a victim. To survive, she had to become stronger than her fear, more cunning than the power that imprisoned her, and more resilient than the injustice that had torn her from her world. This realization was his first step towards an inner strength that no darkness, nor any wealth, could ever destroy. Weeks passed, but Lila Harper refused to be broken. Each day, she learned to read the intentions behind Victor Sinclair's words, to anticipate his moods, and to sense the cracks in his authority. Her innocence remained intact, but a new strength was beginning to grow within her, the quiet determination to no longer be merely prey. One morning, Victor led Lila into the manor's library, a vast room with walls lined with books and sparkling chandeliers. "Today, you will learn discipline," he declared, his voice gentle but heavy with menace. "You must understand the world you are in, even if your eyes cannot see it." Lila nodded, hiding her fear behind a calm posture. But inside, a spark of ingenuity ignited. She decided that if Victor wanted to play this control game, she would learn its rules in order to better challenge him. As the days passed, she observed his habits, the way he moved, the times he seemed impatient, the rooms he rarely frequented. She memorized the corridors, the sounds, the rhythm of the servants. Everything became a puzzle she could solve, a battleground she could one day turn against him. One evening, as the rain drummed against the windows of the manor, Victor burst into her room. "Why haven't you done anything today?" he asked, his anger masked by an unsettling calm. Lila, unfazed, replied in a composed voice, "I was thinking about what you wanted me to learn." Victor stopped, surprised. This wasn't the submission he was expecting. "You're thinking, alone?" he asked, intrigued but also slightly suspicious. Lila nodded. "Yes. I want to understand, so I don't make mistakes." Her seemingly innocent answer concealed a strategy, to show obedience while asserting her ability to think for herself. That night, she realized something essential: fear was no longer her only ally. Her intelligence, patience, and perspicacity could become silent weapons. She began to devise a plan to protect her innocence and, one day, regain control of her life. But Victor, a powerful and manipulative man, already sensed the change. He observed Lila with a newfound attention, a mixture of fascination and suspicion. He knew he had someone exceptional on his hands, and this excited him as much as it worried him. Lila, for her part, knew that the game had only just begun, and that each day spent under his roof brought her closer to a truth she would soon discover: power was never truly held by the one who appeared to possess it. And so, in the silence of the manor, the invisible clash between innocence and domination took shape. Lila Harper was no longer just a blind girl lost in a world of wealth and manipulation. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with, ready to ignite the first flames of her own rebellion. The tension in the manor had reached an almost palpable point. Lila Harper was no longer the unassuming young girl who had been sold to Victor Sinclair. Her mind had sharpened, her instincts heightened. Every step she took in the vast corridors was calculated, every word measured to sow both trust and suspicion in her captor. That evening, Victor invited her to dinner in the great hall. The candlesticks illuminated Lila's face, but she saw nothing, only felt, heard, and sensed the atmosphere. The servants stepped aside, leaving space for a silent confrontation. "You're making progress, Lila," said Victor, a slight smile on his lips. "But the real question is, are you ready to understand me completely?" Lila took a deep breath, feeling her heart beat faster. It was no longer fear, but determination. "I understand that I have to think for myself, even here. Even for you." Victor frowned. No one had ever spoken to him like that. A mixture of admiration and defiance crossed his blue eyes. "You dare," he murmured. Then, for the first time, Lila dared to make a bold move. She stepped slowly towards him, her voice clear and confident. "I'm not here to be broken. You can't take my innocence. You can try, but it belongs to me." Silence fell. Victor stepped back slightly, astonished by the courage of a girl he had thought fragile. For the first time, he had met an adversary worthy of his power, someone who would not simply bend to his will. That night, Lila sensed a shift in the dynamic between them. Victor, who had believed he had complete control, realized that his influence had limits. And she, Lila, for the first time since she had been torn from her life, felt a thrill of freedom. The strength of her mind was becoming her most powerful weapon. As the mansion fell asleep in the heavy silence of nights of wealth and power, Lila Harper knew her fight had only just begun. But she had taken the first step, the one where fear no longer held sway. In the darkness where she had always lived, she had just lit a light that would one day end her captivity and forever alter Victor Sinclair's destiny.